Hello, and welcome to Ransomware Attacks, the Untold Stories. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and Microsoft and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this timely conversation. Now, before I get out of the way for today's expert speakers, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. So first off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail the top questions that you ask. And that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you run into. A browser refresh is going to fix most of your audio, video, and slide advancement issues. But if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Second, I do want to point out in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. We've got some great Rubrik PDFs in there. There's a short 2-page case study on how Plymouth Inc. got hit by Rubrik and managed to recover in 48 hours. You'll hear some about that today, but I'd highly recommend that short explanation of it. There's also a 4-page white paper from Rubrik and Microsoft detailing how to set yourself up to recover from ransomware attacks in a matter of hours. And there's an informative ebook chapter on zero trust and how that relates to ransomware. Also in the handout section, you'll find a link to the Actual Tech Media Guerrilla Guide Book Club and the Actual Tech Media Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. I encourage you to access all those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. At the end of this webinar, we'll also be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky attendee on the live event. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section as well. Just scroll to the bottom. You'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of events like this is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So we've got this $50 Amazon gift card in there for you, as well as an additional, a special additional prize. Just at the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today, David Siles, who's Field CTO from Rubrik, and Joe Dabrowski, who does sales strategy and go-to-market for the Americas for Rubrik.
Awesome. Let me just pull up the slide here.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone. Again, my name is Joe Dabrowski. I lead sales strategy for Rubrik in the Americas. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Myself and David Siles, our field CTO for security, will be leading us through basically what I call denial of data attacks, right? We've all heard the horror stories in the news, but we've learned some serious lessons here at Rubrik, right? Rubrik's got about 4,000 customers today. On average, we see 3 to 5 attacks against that customer base a week. So we've witnessed a lot, we've learned a lot, and for the sake of today's discussion, we've changed some names to protect the innocent. So I'd like to kind of pose a question for you all. Which one of these disasters would be more impactful to your organization or your mission, right? For years and years, we've had a pretty robust DR framework, plans, people testing, investments made by businesses to protect us from fires, floods, hurricanes, things like that. But the reality is we're faced with a new threat these days. And the reason why people back up and protect information is completely shifted, right? Now we've got bad actors that have shown a unique ability to bypass all the investments we've made in security and process and people, and they get to our data and they cause quite a bit of havoc, right? So if you have to look at it this way, like which one would be harder for your business? We've seen some ransomware events and some cyber breaches that quite frankly have been worse than just losing a whole data center. There's significant emotional distress on staffs, reputational harm in ways that no fire could do, right? So The reality is we are faced with an existential threat, and it's a business level threat. So a couple key terms just to set the stage. Disaster recovery really is recover from an IT event, right? Usually some sort of physical issue that prevents you from getting to your data and completing your applications and things like it. Business continuity is really about recovering the business to a predefined level, right? Whereas IT is kind of behind the resiliency team in terms of who's responding to things. And then we've got operational resilience, right? Continue to operate at some sort of level given some sort of adverse event, right? Ransomware takes on a portion of the business or a section of your organization. How do you continue to do what you do? Make widgets, book flights, all sorts of things, right? So here's some different ideas to kind of help set you, because we do hear a lot, hey, this is just like a DR plan. And in essence, it kind of needs that level of detail and that level of drilling, but it's a different type of event that you need to be recovered for. So here's the big threat. I think we've all seen this. The landscape has continually evolved. We've seen, I saw an article last week that 60% of people hit by ransomware in the last year actually paid the bad guys, which seemed exceedingly high to me. But the reality is, the bad actors have continued to evolve their tactics. They've shown unique ability to bypass investments. They're getting into places where, let's face it, we didn't think they'd get to. They're doing things like pulling data out and then holding it hostage against you. We call it a double extortion attack. They've even gone one step further with triple extortion, where they take the liberty to call your customers, which is a pretty scary thought as well. So the reality is this is a business level problem. There's significant reputational harm. There's fines, there's penalties, there's requirements to tell the government if you've been hit, if you've paid bad guys now. So things are only growing from there. Mr. Siles, are you back?
I am. I know I probably foreshadowed this with the slide deck about which disaster is worse, the hurricane, the unknown attacker, or the guy who just hit the power pole out front.
All right, I'll let you take it from here, man.
Power walls and the UPS relays, but I'm back, and it's great to be here with you, Joe. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the landscape is not getting any less scary, and the threat is getting more and more real as the adversary is more and more sophisticated. So we have to be able to really understand their tactics, understand how they're getting at us, and then fight back. So I can go ahead and take on from here. I'll give a couple of from the headlines, right? Rip from the headlines, and I think almost everybody probably heard about Colonial Pipeline, right? Colonial Pipeline obviously supplies over 50% of the fuel on the East Coast of the United States, everything from gasoline to jet fuel. And when the attack happened on them, it was an attack that was actually launched by essentially a ransomware as a service kit. So not like a sophisticated group came after them. Some people obviously thought when the Colonial Pipeline was hit, it was nation state, sponsored, and we were going to be attacked by some sophisticated adversary, and it actually wasn't. And I will tell you, I mean, Pipeline is a Rubrik customer. At the time they were hit, they were using some of our products. They didn't have it everywhere. They had it in most places, but not everywhere. But they actually were really well ready to go. They had a well-exercised IT team, had an operational resilience plan in place. They actually had detection of the event very shortly after it started. And so from everything, from a reactionary perspective and proactive testing and being prepared for it, they were in a great position to do it. However, when you take down the pipeline, it takes almost 4,000 steps to bring it back online. And that, unfortunately, takes time. And, they were definitely at the impact of this becoming political. And if anybody ever's been in politics or works in the government, you understand the politics get in the way. It's the 8th layer of the OSI model, and it starts getting really complex. So, they unfortunately had the benefits of external pressure, and then the citizens' reactions made things worse. But If you want to look at it from what the primary factor here was, it was money, right? They were looking for a quick ransom pay, but they ended up taking out critical infrastructure. And so, contrast to that, if we look at what happened in the summer before then, I think most people heard about this one as well. And this would be the fact that SolarWinds, which is a monitoring network tool, was impacted at the supply chain level. Right. This was a very sophisticated attack. This attack actually happened by nation state actors. They were adversarially in the industry code base of SolarWinds for many months, almost years, and they did it in such a way that they were in the official signed code. So when you think about a manufacturing of software, we trust that that software is going to come from somebody that's going to be trusted, right? And they're signing that code. That's going to be code that we trust. And that's what everybody did. So the cloud vendors, the resellers, all the software vendors who wanted the network monitoring systems from SolarWinds to leverage that and then pushed it downstream. When you think about the supply chain, by the end of the day, it was in every customer. It was in enterprises and markets, financial markets, government agencies, some of the government agencies of the DoD and the intelligence side of the world. And because of this, they had a great penetration into many, many areas, and they could just sit and watch and do what they wanted. And they were able to do that and not only affect intelligence gathering, but also steal a lot of data. And it's only when they decided that they wanted to burn that bridge and let it go that they were able to use it for further damage that obviously uncovered the fact that it was there. But things that you have to think about when you are being attacked by a nation state actor, they're going to get in, right? They're going to get in, Joe. And so, you have to be able to defend your environment at any point in time. And from that perspective, I'd love to walk people through, what a ransomware attack looks like. Because some people, when they hear about a ransomware attack, they think, oh, I downloaded this yesterday and it just encrypted everything. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Most ransomware attacks are very sophisticated if they're not a ransomware as a service approach. And what actually typically happens is a syndicate is going to go and identify a target. They're going to build a purpose-built campaign to go target those end users, right? And we obviously are targeting end users because, like anything in security, your weakest link is usually a human firewall. And so they use that against us. They'll go through and social engineer campaigns, do spear phishing, try to get people to hit websites that are weaponized. That all their whole goal in life is to get them to drop an infection of some sort on that system and allow that system then to become their gateway in. And it's not the ransomware code itself. It's typically some helper applications or some components that allow us to build a remote shell that gets us into that environment. Once that's there, the adversary will then start, bringing down what it will truly end up being in the ransomware and getting it staged and ready to go. But it's not actual ransomware yet. Almost all ransomware attacks today are come down in code base form. They compile in real time or they polymorph so that, there's no detection by signatures. There's nothing there yet that, is going to be persistent for them to detect. However, they are getting it ready to go and they're going to make sure that it's going to survive reboots and things like that and patch management. And when they're ready to go, what they're going to do is they'll start scanning the network. They're going to find all the target-rich environments that are available to them. And once they've got that landscape done, like we just talked about, Joe, they're going to start stealing the data, right? They're going to try to get it out the building as fast as possible, however smart as possible, because they don't want to move too much data so that you're not seeing it in your bandwidth. And once they have that, then they will kick off and actually encrypt your data. And the whole goal in life is to get you to pay that ransom. Now, behind me, it says, don't pay the ransom. It says it for a reason. We're going to keep having this problem until people stop paying ransom. So if you don't have Bitcoin in your treasury and ready to pay that ransom, you better have an insurance policy, right? And insurance takes different forms. It can be written by an insurance company. It can also be underwritten by a backup system. Something that is going to guarantee you that you got recoverability. And so, I'll hand it off to you because this is where, I know you on a day-to-day basis are working with our customers as well. and helping them understand that. Actually, I think the next slide is mine still, but I think we helping them understand that things have to evolve, right? And when I say evolve, I mean almost reset the table. Right? You have to make sure that your backups are not only immutable, but that you have guaranteed immutability that you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and you have to be able to guarantee that you can recover and recover at scale and the way you need it to. In today's world, every single breach that we've worked here at Rubrik in terms of a security event that's been ransomware driven, every single one of them had data exfiltration of some sort. And when that happens, the customer's a little bit shocked, but they also don't understand necessarily what was taken. And so having the ability to identify where your sensitive data is in your business, understanding the value to your business and how the risk that your business would be facing if it lost that is key. And if you're in a regulated industry, you have to understand that because you have a compliance requirement and a due diligence that if it's exposed, impacted, that you have to report on that. Maybe fines that come along with that as well. So understanding and managing that risk is key. And so there are tools now that allow you to do that at scale, necessarily in real time, but in a total of time that you get that complete visibility you need. And of course, the adversary is using today's latest technologies and advances. They're using artificial intelligence. They're using machine learning. Why can't we use the same to fight back, right? We can. There are solutions out there now that give you that level of intelligence to understand that, hey, look, something bad is happening. May not know exactly what it is, but it's suspect enough that we have an anomaly that we should take a look into it and start remediating or defending ourselves. And when you try to do that at human scale, you just can't do it anymore. The amount of data that we have in today's world, the amount of sensor traffic that comes in, by the time you get through and humanly analyzed it, the event would be long over. So the only real way to stay in front of it and fight back is to have solutions that have that powered intelligence that are working for you and fighting for you at that same time. So evolution has to happen. And when we look at evolution, it really is starting with how do you get a backup going to give you that guaranteed recovery or that last good copy of survivability. And that's not going to come from your legacy backup vendors. Unfortunately, they were all created equal, and that equal environment is now being unequalized by the attacks that are out there. So you need to look for a next generation platform that's going to give you guaranteed immutability that has some of that intelligence I was just talking about in it. Help you then exploit the value of long-term archival and things such as the cloud, or even taking advantage of the cloud as a secondary recovery location. And you want to obviously be able to do that at the same time, one unified platform with a unified control plane. But you have to do this with something that has the basis of security, right? Security first, or zero trust, it's overused in our industry, is absolutely the new standard barrier that you have to be thinking about. It's no different than when you were buying storage before, Joe, and you had to have data duplication, you had to have compression, you had to have all these checkboxes. The new checkbox is you have to have immutability with zero trust. And what we mean by zero trust is that the fact that you don't trust anybody, you don't trust your own system, you verify every single access call that comes to that data. Because when you think about it, at the end of the day, your backup is your last copy of resort. It's also the informational gold of everything in your business. And so you have to protect it with the highest level of security. Think of it as you need Fort Knox, right, in a box. Why is that the case, Joe? Because if you ask me, we used to build moats with fire-breathing dragons, and we would have this hard exterior core. But if you could walk across the VPN bridge and get inside, you were in the soft, chewy, gooey center of everything, right? And it was free reign, data was everywhere. And while that sounded great from a security perspective, insider threat and a whole bunch of stuff happens here. And if you could get in there, the game was over. But then what would happen? We went and got into data mobility. We got the cloud to come in. We went through hyperscaling. Then we had COVID, right? And we said, okay, well, we can't shut down the business. Everything has to keep operating. Everything's running in SaaS now. The data's on the move. I don't care who you are or where you're at. Everybody has 8 to 10 working copies of the data somewhere. and whether it's through copy data management, shadow IT, whatever it may be. And so, the concept of, us building this moat and putting the fire-breathing dragon there doesn't work anymore. People still do it. You still spend money on it, but you got to have data protection, data management anywhere. And that provides a huge security challenge. And so, I'm going to pass it off to you, because I think the hypothesis here is we have to rethink where the security layer lives when we think about our data.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David. You're absolutely right here. Data and, data security and, all of the things we've already done need to come together, right? We've invested a lot of time in people, process, and technology to defend, the exterior, right? The endpoints, do network detection, SIMs and solar platforms and things like that, right? And those are all absolutely great investments. But I think we've often done that sometimes by forgetting about the data, right? And I think the bad actors know this, right? They've specifically attacked the data. Data has gravity. It's hard to move around. It's not an ephemeral object, right? So the bad guys know this. They're going after the data. Then they're going even further by going after your recovery copies, right? They're attacking the backups. And that is really where we're seeing the convergence right now. We must build resiliency at the data layer to ensure recoverability, ensure that we can bring the business or the mission back online as quickly as possible, right? It's one thing to say you've been hit. It's another thing to say, hey, we can recover. But the number one question you should have is, how long did it take us to recover? And what was the impact of the business or our operations, right? And what we're finding is it's massive, right? So we got to think about this a little bit differently. So here's some of the problems, right? Modern backup, or traditional based backups have been built upon, open protocol design for years, right? Quite simply, they're NAS boxes hanging off the network. They're discoverable by bad actors. The bad guys are looking for them. You can enumerate to them. You can take them over. You can do things to them that really will prevent organizations from recovering. The second hard part to understand is what changed. What did the bad guys do? Again, this is not like a fire or a flood where, hey, everything went offline yesterday at 4:00. It's a new paradigm. The bad actors have come in and scrambled up 28% of your file share that has 2 billion files in it. How am I going to recover a couple 100 million files? How do I know which ones to recover? How long is it going to take me to figure that out? Have I tested this? Right? Those are all really, really hard questions to solve. The next thing is, what did they take, right? They're going to exfiltrate things. They're going to hold it hostage. No offense. It's one thing if it's Mr. Siles, vacation pictures from last summer. It's another thing if it's, my forecast, right, to the business, right? So there's criticality there. That changes how we alert, right? If you're doing business in Europe, like maybe you need to alert the GDPR folks, right? That's a significant fine behind that one. There's teeth behind that one. And then last but not least is like, how do I orchestrate a full-on recovery, right? We're going to have a lot of cooks in the kitchen now. We've got, IT operations. They own the backup and recovery platform. They own VMware. They own maybe the BCDR plan. And then we've got security ops. They're trying to figure out what happened. Do we have trust in the network? How do we stop this from happening again? But have these two teams sat down and talked through this? Are they friendly? Are they addressing the problem? I think, in my travels, David, and I'm not sure what you've seen, not always, going out for beers after work type of thing, right? So we got to break down some barriers to help people recover, right? So what do we need? What do we need to solve for? Like, what does good look like? What are my requirements, if you will? Well, first of all, native immutability really is zero trust framework, right? It's not only immutability, but it's air gapping. It's how you're doing retention, locking, and controls. It's all sorts of different vectors. Again, we've seen hundreds of attacks against our customer base. We are in real time iterating against our product to make it harder, to make it better, to make it more useful in these type of scenarios. We need to understand what the blast radius was, right? Again, you don't want to recover to 2 weeks ago when this fall first started or 3 days ago when the encryption started. You want to recover only the data that was impacted so you can get the business back online. We need some sort of assessment of the sensitive data impact here, right? Tell us what we're dealing with. Tell us if we need to alert, right? Again, if you think about a ransomware attack, the bad actors are in a negotiation with you. One of their tactics is to raise the tension, is to turn up the heat to you. An informational advantage is how they do it, right? They've been in your environment maybe for months. They might know some things about your environment, right? And then how do I run end-to-end recovery? Do I have a place to recover to? Have I tested it? Right? Is it a clean environment? How do I know I'm not restarting an infection? Right? Again, it takes this DRBC like planning mindset, but again, you're not going to fail over in one of these type of events. You've probably been encrypted there as well, right? So it's a little bit of a different type of recovery.
It absolutely is. You're absolutely right, Joe. I mean, it's one of those things. I think when you think about today's environment, the DR plan and the cyber resiliency plan are totally separate. And if you think you're one and the same, what you have here on the screen is going to prove to you that that's not the case.
Yeah. So David, maybe you can help us with this slide, right? We hear a lot about, what is immutability? And then we've got air gapping. Should I use one over the other? Like, what are they and why do I need them?
The answer is yes. You need all of it, right? Here's the reason why. Unfortunately, the model of yesterday was, let's put some data protection software on some commodity hardware, Windows, Linux, whatever it may be. Get some capacitance of disk, and that used to be inside the same system. And then we're like, well, that's too much to put in one system. So now we're going to go get disk-to-disk targets. And then when you have a disk-to-disk target, obviously you have to have some form of protocol to talk to it, most likely SMB, NFS. And then from there, you would want to journalize that off the tape or possibly another location, because you got to still have, the good management rule of data protection, 3 copies of data, 2 different locations, 1 off-site. But that said, one of the things that makes that workable is the fact that it's open and discoverable. And so if you think about disk-to-disk targets, by definition, you have to read into them, you have to write out of them, and most of those are controlled through policy, but they have a read-write capability to them because they're storage. And the adversary knows that, so they can go in and read the data, steal what they want, then they can write over it or encrypt it with the data they want to take hostage. They also can find it very easy because it's on open protocols by design, and they can enumerate that. So one of the things that we see when an attack comes in, the very first thing that they do when they say they're going to kick off the attack is they go find that resilient copy and take it out. Because if you don't have a backup copy to recover from, and then they take out that first, and then they take out production, the chances of paying ransom go really, really up. So when you think about it with the lens of next generation data management, Rubrik or anybody other vendor side, you have to have a layer of guaranteed recoverability. The only way to do that is really to have an offline copy. Now, there's different ways to achieve offline, right? You can do data vaults, you can do the cloud, you can do tape again. But in today's world, most customers are always on enterprises anymore. We're always generating data. It always has to be protected. So can you really take a data system, move that copy of data in the time you have for the backup window and get it offline? For some companies, it's never possible. So you have to look at platforms that give you the ability to be connected to the network, but make sure your data repository is never on the network. Right? We call it logical air gapping. And when you have this logical air gap, you essentially get a data vault. At the minute the data is committed, that can't be discovered, enumerated, mounted, or changed. Now, on top of that, you need immutability. And immutability is the guarantee that the data is written in a form that can't be modified, can't be well, it can be deleted, but can't be modified, can't be changed, right? And so with our approach, we happen to have written an immutable file system that's append only. What that append only means is that we write data, net new locations all the time. We don't have a modify, we don't have update capability at the file system layer. And because it was purpose built to be immutable, air gapped in that logical vault, the ability for the attacker to really affect the file vault is very, very low, and survivability of it's very, very high. So it's one of those things you have to start thinking about, but it is that barrier of truth that you need today to have any chance to be able to recover from a survivable copy of data.
Awesome, thanks. All right, so here's what we brought to bear, right? Again, we're iterating all the time. Microsoft took equity stake in us last summer. So we brought a number of things to market that I think are really interesting that help customers directly address the risks that they're faced with, right? So all of this is built upon our zero trust framework, right? The idea that we always ensure recoverability of your last line of defense data, right? From there, we built our ransomware investigation capabilities, the idea of understanding blast radius. Furthermore, incident containment, right? This is something brand new that Rubrik's just bringing out now. The idea that within backups, right, we can take a set of, for example, YARA rules, and we can run them against a backup copy to determine when the payload file got in there, right? And we can stop that payload file from being recovered. What that does is stops this reinfection kind of vicious circle, I call, right? Hey, we've been hit by a security event. We're going to recover. We now have a place to recover. We recover a bunch of data, and boom, the infection starts again and again and again. And if you put yourselves in the shoes of somebody recovering from a bad event, this is a really, really bad look, right? You're going to tell the business we're going to be up and running in 2 hours, 4 hours, as soon as we get a good, clean copy, and it takes you 30 tries, right? We've seen that movie before, and it's not exactly a happy time. So identifying that payload file and stopping it from being reintroduced is a really critical capability. Understanding the sensitive data impact, and then how do you restart the business, right? So these are all things that we've worked with Microsoft on. We also have what's called Rubrik Cloud Vault now, which is built upon Azure technology. Basically, it's an air-gapped copy that sits in Azure. So if you're on-prem and your admins are compromised, right, they can't get into the Rubrik Cloud Vault through a different, they've got different credentials, and basically delete that recoverability, right? We can ensure that that will be there, through our relationship with Microsoft. So we're bringing a lot of things to bear right now. There's more coming out this summer we don't have time to get into today, but I'm pretty excited about the future of what we're doing with Microsoft. And then, again, here's really what we see, right? The bad guys are getting in, phishing RDP type of exploits. I think the idea now is nobody's really all that interested in talking about paying the ransom, because it's a much bigger business problem than just a few Bitcoin, right? We've got reputational harm, we've got lawsuits, we've got fines and penalties, right? Things like that. So it's really important that IT ops and security ops figure this thing out together, right? Have the discussion, figure out who owns what during an active scenario, do a tabletop exercise, get it out there, right? If you don't have Rubrik, start talking about how are you going to harden your backup, right? 70% of the open market attacks involve hitting the backups first. So what steps have you taken to harden your backup and ensure recoverability? Then during the recover phase, how are you going to determine what data was impacted? Like, what is your plan around that? How are you going to know if sensitive data was exfiltrated? How are you going to make sure you don't restart the infection? And then how do you know where to recover to, right? How long will that take? What is the business impact, right? To revenue, to customer service, all sorts of things. So again, it's not just, hey, do we pay the bad guys? This goes away. No big deal, right? Crisis averted. That's not how it goes down at all, right? There's significant pain here from a business level. All right, so 3 questions that I think you all want to ask yourself, right? Do you know what is happening to your data, right? Do you know who is doing what to your data during an event? And then how sensitive is the content of your data, right? These are massive impact questions as it relates to data sensitivity and how and if you would need to alert external parties to a breach scenario. Right, so Rubrik's taken a really interesting approach to this. What we do is we scan backups using filters or basically, scans, right, for sensitive data, right? PII, PCI data, really anything. It could be social security numbers, it could be credit card information, what have you. We can use regular expression or dictionary lookups here, but simply put, we're scanning a passive copy that's putting no load. We don't need agents. Right? And we can tell you in a peacetime scenario where you have sensitive data, where you have files with open access, right? Things like that. The idea here is you get your house in order in a peacetime scenario so you're better prepared for wartime. Mr. Siles, do you have anything to add to this one?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, if you don't understand where your sensitive information is, you're already lost, right? You can't not know anymore, right? Security through obscurity, as we used to look at it, even 5-6 years ago, doesn't fly. I don't know. It's not an active defense. It's not going to hold up in a court. It's not going to get you out of compliance fines. So might as well get your hands around it. I will say, having been in this space and having worked in different areas of data classification, data governance over the last 10 years or so, every customer who does some form of data governance, data discovery, will find information in some location that they didn't expect to see it. I've done this across thousands of customers. There's still not one that knew where everything was and had visibility and the right policy, governance, and controls. Because think about it, Joe. I mean, how many people shrink their storage footprint? No one. Storage is cheap, right? We all could be on the hoarder show because we all hoard data. And so some of that data now is 20, 30 years old. Just because you're 30 years old data doesn't mean that social security number is not a valid exposure. So, getting your hands around it is absolutely key. Our approach to it is very unique. From the point of the backup, the one thing you get is that 360-degree view, because you get to see everything. Where a lot of tools today in this space, just because of the impact, the performance, they only do scan on access or scan on write. And so, your hot data is all getting analyzed, but there's cold data, there's dormant data, there's dark data. That has to be looked at too, because just because you're not looking at it doesn't mean the adversary is not looking at it. To that point, I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the in the trenches, right? One of the things that we have at Rubrik is a world-class response team. And so for all of our customer base, if they have any kind of security issue, any kind of event, they can call in and activate Rubrik's rapid response team. And we do this at no cost for our customers. I don't care if you're our smallest customer or government, right? Fortune 0. We're going to help you. And when you think about all the different type of verticals we support, we have everything from life safety, medical, all the way down to critical infrastructure. The Crowell pipeline we talked about earlier. This is a national airline, right? I can't say their name, so I want to protect some of the innocent and guilty here. But international airline, they were hit by the Conti ransomware group, but they were so well prepared. This never hit the newspaper. They only took 30 minutes of downtime. Now, granted, they did stop some planes from flying, but they took 30 minutes of downtime, recovered everything in under 4 hours, right? How was that possible? Well, one, they are all in on us, have everything that their critical systems run on are protected by Rubrik. They followed all of our best practices, right? They had an isolated recovery environment. And what that is that's a dedicated set of hardware that the customer has tested and validated in advance, that in the moment of need, they can bring online trust for recovery. They weren't trying to figure out, am I going to recover in place? Do I have to go buy new hardware? Do I reformat my test dev environment to get back to a place I can recover? They had a forensic clean room, think about it, ready to go. And their team was very well tested. They already trained on this. They red team, blue team. They'd gone through this exercise, had everything ready, validated, ready to go. So when they finally engaged us, it was almost just kind of rubber stamping what they already knew they were going to do. And, unfortunately for them, it took a little bit of downtime. It had customer impact, had brand impact, but nowhere near what it could have been, if they had legacy solutions and they weren't tested and validated, to the point where they now own everything in the Rubrik suite, right? They've gone through and done the data classification. They're doing the threat analysis. They have the ability to do, proactive testing with automation and blueprints. So, great success story there. A flip side of that, you think about, the impact to the world and the domino effect. We have customers that, are critical to our lives in terms of producing, produce, meats, foods that we eat. And one of them being Plymouth. This is a public-facing case study, so I can use their name. But they were hit by Rook, and they essentially, had an incomplete business continuity plan. So while they had Rubrik, they had not tested and done a full test. They had not written a business continuity plan. They had no real basis yet of understanding the critical systems in their business. However, they had a barrier of Rubrik in the environment. So when they did have to activate us and we came in to help them, we quickly identified all the exposure, right? And they brought in some experts as well, and they realized that all the domain join systems were impacted. So they had to do a full-on business recovery. That said, they were able to do a full recovery. They ran on Rubrik, used their instant recovery capability, never paid $1 in ransom, and had full recovery of critical environment systems in under 48 hours. We worked in concert with them. We helped them understand how to do the recovery. And this is something that we do with this response team. We gave them our best in class support, and they, are very appreciative of that. But at the same time, at the end of the day, they were able to recover because that architecture we talked about a little bit ago absolutely is the right one to survive these type of events. That said, they've expanded. We're 100% in their environment now. And one of the things that they recognize is that we not only provided this immutable, guaranteeable, recoverable copy, and that we supported them all the way through it. Rubrik is leading the industry in terms of putting our money where our mouth is. We have a ransomware recovery warranty that we give our customers a guarantee that if we can't recover their data for some reason, we will help them through co-insurance pay for it. And we qualify for up to $5 million, which is market leading. No one else in the industry is doing it, because not a lot of people can guarantee that level of recoverability that Rubrik's putting out. So, when you think about it, Joe, I mean, you're on the front lines helping sell this. Our customers obviously are buying into zero trust data security for these reasons.
Yeah, David, I want to hit on something. As you walk through those last two stories, it's really clear to me those that are prepared have a much easier time, getting out of one of these pickles, so to speak, right? The airline you showed, right? They
Absolutely.
had drilled, they had practiced, and their recovery was quite elegant, right? All things considered. Plymouth, not as much so. We were still able to recover them, and I personally witnessed an attack on a higher ed last summer where we were really the only thing. Rubrik was the only thing that wasn't taken out during the attack, and we were the only reason they were able to get up. But it hit them square in the head. They didn't have a isolated recovery environment. It's not like servers can just show up on your door now, right? There's some significant lead times. So the questions
Right.
we've kind of posed today over and over again, I'd strongly recommend you all kind of ask yourselves, have we thought through this, right? Have we had this discussion, or is this at the forefront? Because again, the impact is massive. And, quite honestly, the amount of work that it takes to kind of have these discussions up front, there's some significant ROI there.
That's right. So yeah, really at the end of the day, think about it. If you have a solution that's not going to give you defensibility, you have to think about how do you replace that legacy data protection. Most likely you're thinking with the cloud lens. So making sure that something that can cross over and have you unified management, single pane of glass that gives you one to rule all across whether it's on premise in the cloud or at the edge is key. And again, today the barrier for entry is zero trust data security at your data protection layer. So everything we've talked about obviously can be experienced. If you want to learn more about Rubrik after this, please follow up with us. We'd be happy to come in and show you how we achieve all these different areas and bring you into our customer family where customers are winning the fight back. And if you want to understand a reference case study for someone in your vertical and how they've achieved and been successful with Rubrik, please reach out. Now, I think we have a little bit of time. I know, Scott, I think you're out there. If we have some questions, we'd love to field the questions from the audience.
Awesome. Yeah, and we have a ton of questions coming in, and so far they've been coming in three buckets. There's like security landscape questions. There's questions about how to deal with ransomware from a business perspective, and a lot of questions about Rubrik's technology approach. So the first one I want to get to is one of these landscape questions. This comes from Jadeep, who's asking, oh, wait, it moved on me. These questions are coming in so fast; it's hard to keep track of where they are. Well, let me skip to another one. Peter had a question. He's kind of noting the rip from the headlines elements of your presentation, and by the way, he liked your new layer to OSI politics. I think from the Colonial Pipeline, but he's wondering what you're seeing around the Russia-Ukraine situation. Has there been more or fewer attacks over the the month and a half of that situation, and has the nature of attacks
Oh, that's a
changed? What
great
do you guys
question.
think
Yeah,
from
great
sort of your
question.
catbird seat there?
Well, I mean, it's very apropos question because it is impacting in twofold, right? One is Russian actors are doing more and more adversarial, um, partly because they're being sanctioned against, and because they're being sanctioned against, they still have to get revenue in. They are using some of their skill set, and they're very well skilled in the GRU to go out and attack and still use that to try to bring in revenue. It will never be classified as official revenue, but that's what's happening there. Secondly, they are using it against Ukraine, right? We have seen some of the attacks that are going into Ukraine, and some of those are being driven not only specifically ransomware, but malware type of attacks. So they're using that. And then you have the copycats. You have these other crime groups who are saying, you know what, this is the perfect smoke screen. Blame it on Russia. We'll be the effective actor and make it look like them. Everybody's mad at them already. They'll just assume it was them, and we'll go grab some money. So yes, it is happening across the board. I won't mention the bank I've talked with, but one of the big banks in Europe, pretty much is worried about being wiped off the map, not just encrypted, wiped off the map during this because of the side of the conflict they support. So there's that involved as well.
The only thing I'll add to that one is, we've seen the hacktivist community, kind of blow back against Russia here, right? I'm not sure if anyone out there has seen it, but there's something called the Conti leaks, right? Where they basically leak the internal chats of one of these ransomware as a service gangs. And you can see they've got HR departments and they've got bonus structures and they operate like a business. And, if you dig deep in the chats, they even might be a little frustrated by this company called Rubrik, probably for the things that Siles and I talked about today. So a little validation hidden in there.
We do have
Nice.
we have a bogey in
our. And another question on this landscape side comes from Michael, and he's asking about statistics on things like average time to recover, ransom amounts paid, and good places to look. And I'll quickly recommend Actual Tech Media's own site, ransomware.org, for a lot of that kind of stuff. But what are you guys seeing around like time to recover and trends and ransom amounts?
Well, time to recover comes down to how prepared you are. A customer who has a well-exercised plan, tested, typically can recover in under 48 hours. At least their critical systems, and keep business lights on, revenue coming in. The ones that don't test, the ones that have no plan, it can be anywhere from a couple days to weeks to even months to get back to operational steady state. And unfortunately, we see that. Sometimes, I hate to sell fire insurance the day after the fire, but we often get called, the day after the fire. And when you have the talk with the customer about how they went through the process, they're still in that process. I mean, they're buying a new solution because the other one failed them. They're still in the process of trying to get back to operations. So, it can literally take months. And for some customers, depending on the size of your business, whether or not you can survive a month or two of downtime. Some customers, they're down 3 hours, 4 hours, they're out of business. I mean, there are banks that literally have fines that kick into tens of millions if they can't recover customer accounts in 3 hours. So it's real deal. The average ransom is continuing to grow. The high water mark last year was 30 million. There's already been a $50 million ransom paid this year. That's nothing though. The ransom paid is nothing compared to brand impact, brand reputation, loss of revenue, employee productivity costs. Think about sending home, 5,000 people from a corporation and still paying their salary and getting no productivity out of them. Right? You can easily outweigh the ransom 20, 30x.
Maybe we could pivot to some of the, the business questions. Michael had sort of a two-parter. He's wondering, one, you were talking about Bitcoin, and is there a best practice as far as should people have some Bitcoin on hand just in case, or is it better to buy it at the time, that you need it? And I'll leave it at that, and then I'll ask the second part of the question.
Good question. There are companies that will treasury Bitcoin now for doomsday, and You don't necessarily have to do that. I mean, cyber risk insurance companies do this as part of their service fee as well. You also can engage purpose-built COM, hostage negotiators, essentially attorneys that specialize in this space, and they typically have, as part of their service, a repository of Bitcoin. But if you're a large enough company, or you want to take the risk-reward benefit on your side of the table, then yes, we do see companies treasuring Bitcoin and other forms of cryptocurrency payment. It's a double-edged sword, though, because if you read some of the regulations that are out there now, especially the federal government acts around paying state-sponsored activists, you may be breaking the law. You may be actually paying somebody that you legally can't pay, and you may not know that you're paying them, but unfortunately, that's one of those barriers of entry. So I would always recommend that if you're in an event, bring in an outside specialist. Even if you think you have the skill set internally, there's two reasons to bring an external attorney in. One, you get attorney-client privilege, right? So anything you do during your discovery, if you're copying them on that communication, it's not discoverable, because I guarantee at some point someone's going to see you at the end of this, right? Two, they're experts in this. They do it every single day of the week, and you do it maybe once in your environment. So, trying to learn on the fly against somebody who is doing this as a business, they're always going to have the upper hand on you. So bring in someone who's their equal or better, and try to investigate who you want to bring in advance, because you can pre-contract with those people for $800, $900 an hour today, and you can call them at the moment of need and pay $3,000 an hour. So there are some economies of scale there where you would really want to get the SWAT team you're going to bring in on retainer. And again, your cyber risk insurance company is going to help you here. Your outside counsel is going to help you here, but make sure you have those people in place. And that's why you also have to build this plan and test it. If you're not testing this in advance, you're never going to think about those people that you need to call. You're going to focus just on the IT pieces of it, and you're going to miss a huge part of the equation that may make or break you in the end.
And before we get to the second part of Michael's question, I want to stick with what you were saying there about cyber risk and cyber insurance. And I apologize to the questioner. I forget who asked this one, but wondering how does Rubrik help get cyber insurance coverage or keep premiums low?
You want to take this one, David?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, this is one we get a lot.
We obviously. Go ahead, Joe.
It's a question we get a lot, right? And if we've seen anything in the last 12 to 18 months, generally speaking, premiums are 2 to 4x what they were, in the period before that. Coverages are being dropped, right, from $5, $3 to $1 million type of thing. The attestation form has gone from like a one-page checkbox to 15, 20 pages, sometimes a SOC level audit, right? Certain protection workflows are not being covered as of next year. I just talked to a customer the other day, a potential customer, and they're doing, they've got a high file count, dense file system environment, right? A lot of scanned images, for lack of a better term. And so they can really only snap and replicate because of the way traditional backups have worked, right? Just pulling, a couple billion files off of a storage device isn't easy. So their cyber insurance has come back to them and said, listen, if you only snap and replicate again next year, we will not cyber insure you, right? This is the lifeblood of your business. So we're seeing it over and over again. We're in the process of kicking off some relationships with cyber insurance organizations to help them tell you what good looks like. Right? Well, we've seen some requirements that are pretty basic. It's, air gap your backups, or, have multi-factor. It's very, very surface level things. But the reality is those insurance companies are kind of paying out more than they're getting in right now, right? Their metrics are upside down. So you're going to continue to see this market become more and more expensive. And unless something's done, my estimation will be there will be cyber insurance for just a limited few, unless we take some action right now.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so, there's another question from Michael, and actually I promised to get back to, the second part of his question, and it's, what's the best pathway to getting the necessary attention and buy-in from business leadership regarding the seriousness of ransomware threats? And
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, for one, many customers now are getting the pressure downstream. It's already at a board level because the boards are fully conscious of the fact that this is happening. It's hitting their peers, and they don't want to be the next person on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, right? So you see more and more CIOs, CTOs calling us saying, "Hey, look, my board has told me fix this problem because if we're on the front page, you're finding a new job." If your executive leadership is not doing that, there are plenty of referenceable case studies now, whether on our website, on ATM's ransomware website. You can go to Verizon's data breach report that comes out every year, the state of ransomware from Sophos. There's tons of data that say, hey, look, we have to deal with this. And if you can't get awareness from that perspective, bring in a vendor like us. We do this on a day-to-day basis. We have the ability to kind of educate, and we do educate, right? I mean, we're not here just to sell product. We partner, and part of partnering is making sure people understand the risk, the exposure, and why you need to think about doing something different. So engage those kind of resources. But at the end of the day, peer pressure is pretty real. Just go out and search your industry, find somebody who was a peer to you, and I guarantee you'll find 2 or 3 stories at bare minimum in Google of people who were impacted. And the old adage, any press is good press, doesn't apply here. This is press you don't want to have. It's one way to open the eyes. That other said, you can also do tabletop exercises. If you want to engage a tabletop exercise, reach out to me. We have an exercise that we've put together. It's ACME'd, so it works in any company, any industry. But we'll help you understand what a day in the life of a ransomware event is. Let your team go through that experience and see how they would respond. It's an eye-opening experience. If you haven't thought about it, I guarantee we'll point out things that you're not thinking about. But it typically scares the people who have to understand that their business is probably gone and their jobs are over if they don't deal with it. And not fear selling, but awareness selling. So we can give some of that awareness back to the business and help you open those doors so that you can have the conversation.
Okay.
We're almost out of time. That was a great last question.
Yeah, great question.
Exactly. It really was. Well, and like you said, it's probably a great place to leave it. So, David and Joe, thanks so much for coming on. This has been a great conversation. Appreciate you taking all these questions. I hope that you can get to some of these afterward, because we had dozens of questions come through, a lot of great questions, and unfortunately, this wasn't time.
We will make sure we follow up with you if we didn't answer live. We'll get you an answer back, because every one of those questions that came in looked to be very valid. So I want to make sure that we'll do that. We'll follow up with you.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for being on. Really appreciate it. And now we, as always, it's time for our prize drawing. And so the $300 Amazon gift card prize goes to Tanya Cook from Michigan. So congratulations to Tanya. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik and Microsoft for making this event possible. And thanks, as always, for attending and for your great questions. And that concludes today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.